Tonight, is the clock ticking down on Justin Trudeau? The expectation of caucus members with a special meeting set for this week.
Will almost certainly include an ultimatum for him to leave, possibly a secret ballot.
The latest on who could be making a bid for the top spot. Wicked weather impacts millions of Canadians on the first weekend of the new year.
With winds accompanying anywhere between 70 to 100 kilometers an hour, we could expect some power outages.
The final farewell to Jimmy Carter, how supporters are paying tribute to a former president.
I know in my heart, and you all do, that his legacy will live on.
Plus, fans look to honor the Littlest Hobo.
That song is just a piece of Canadian history.
The petition pushing for a star on Canada's Walk of Fame.
There's a voice that keeps on calling me.
CTV National News with Heather Butts.
Good evening. Could there be more dissent brewing in Ottawa's halls of power? A Liberal caucus meeting is just days away where the Prime Minister's future will be front and centre. This as CTV News learns one of the leading candidates to replace Justin Trudeau may be considering a run for the throne. CTV's Colton Prail has the story.
After months of speculation and rumors, Mark Carney is seemingly ready to throw his hat in the political ring. Sources tell CTV News the former Bank of Canada governor is actively considering running in a potential Liberal leadership race should Justin Trudeau resign.
There isn't this solidarity in a majority parliament that has the confidence of the House until October. And so people do feel like they need to be prepared. People do want to have a plan.
Since Boxing Day, sources say the former central banker turned Liberal Party economics advisor has made and received phone calls from dozens of Liberal MPs who view him as a potential replacement for Trudeau. Pressure has been mounting on the Prime Minister for weeks as more and more MPs openly oppose his leadership. On Wednesday, Trudeau will face those MPs at a special national caucus for the first time since he said he would reflect on his future.
I think the expectation of caucus members, certainly those I've spoken with over the holidays, is that the Prime Minister will announce his departure, probably Monday, Tuesday, but that if he doesn't, then they will tell him in no uncertain terms that he must leave.
And while some Liberal MPs look to plan for life after Trudeau, the Conservatives have already been doing that for months.
Then he went and got his banker friend, carbon tax Carney, to become his top economic advisor.
Attempting to tie Carney to the Liberals' unpopular carbon tax policy. While some Liberals argue Carney's economic experience could help improve affordability, a key issue the Conservatives have used to garner support.
Because they've tried everything else from a policy perspective, messaging, they've tried attacking Pierre Poilievre, attack ads, all that kind of stuff. None of it's stuck and none of it's worked. And the only thing left is to change the leader.
If the Prime Minister does resign, the question becomes how quickly the Liberals can find a new leader and how best to do so with an election looming. Heather.
CTV's Colton Prail in Ottawa. Millions of Canadians are feeling the impact of extreme weather this weekend. Some regions set to receive huge snowfall totals, others bracing for the bitter cold. CTV's Kamal Kramali takes a look at the conditions across the country.
This weekend, it's all about bundling up and bracing for a blast of winter.
It's pretty gnarly, honestly. It's been a bit of a pain trying to get it all shoveled out.
As blankets of snow seen across the country and across all kinds of winter weather events.
It's all saying flurries and squalls. I mean, nothing could be more opposite. Flurries, you get rid of it with your broom, and squalls, my gosh, you would need a snowblower.
Parts of the Yukon and Northwest Territories dealing with extreme cold and blizzard warnings, with the wind chill nearing -50. Extreme cold warnings also across the prairies in Saskatchewan, Manitoba, as well as in eastern Ontario, where wind chill is approaching -40 tonight. A blowing snow advisory in northern Ontario, while large areas of southern Ontario are dealing with snow squalls from today into Sunday. Here in Barrie, Ontario, it's far from a day off when there's a lot of work to be done.
We've been out here 2 or 3 times today already shoveling.
Further east, large swaths of the Maritimes battling multiple weather warnings this weekend from snowfall, wind, and even coastal flooding from large ocean waves. Officials advising people to stay inside.
With winds accompanying anywhere between 70 to 100 kilometers an hour. So along the coast, it's going to be a wet snow, so we could expect some power outages with this.
The goal for some in Ottawa, though, is to make the most of this cold snap with some backyard hockey.
Anywhere from minus 15 to 20 is ideal, but you need a few days of those.
And that's exactly what they'll get in the capital with those double-digit freezing temperatures set to carry over into Monday, with other parts of the country possibly seeing a slight weather warm-up by early next week. Kamal Karamali, CTV News, Toronto.
And south of the border, a major winter storm is wreaking havoc, coating roads in freezing rain. The system moving across the central U.S. is expected to bring blizzard conditions and frigid cold, forecasted to move east with millions of Americans in its path. A warning, our next report may be disturbing to some viewers. Survivors of domestic violence are sharing their stories tonight and calling for Canadians to support those dealing with abuse. As CTV's Sarah Plowman reports, it follows a week of tragedy.
I'm the mother of 3 and a survivor of domestic violence.
She was almost murdered. In 1997, Colette Martin's ex-boyfriend stabbed her 37 times. She lived but was lost. Her voice is now her power.
I made it through, and so can you.
For years, she didn't talk about it.
I didn't want to re-traumatize my family because we have gone through so much, and nobody really wants to hear about it. You feel so much shame and so much guilt, and society makes you feel like you've done something wrong.
As intimate partner violence grows in Canada, Martin's message is listen to survivors, don't judge.
We need to be heard, we need to be believed, we need to be seen.
How many there are, it's hard to know. Not everyone comes forward. But statistics show it's getting worse. In 2023, there were more than 123,000 cases of intimate partner violence, a 13% jump in 5 years. Most of the victims are women.
Anya and Stanislaw were
On Friday in Calgary, a vigil for Anya Kaminsky and her dad, Stanislaw Wardzala, killed, police say, by Anya's husband, who later took his own life.
We can all see our mothers, our daughters, our sisters, our friends, and indeed our wider family when we see things happen to people in our community such as this.
In St. John, New Brunswick, a man is accused of killing his wife, Nixie Rodriguez. In North Preston, Nova Scotia, people rally behind the family of Coralie Smith and Bradford Downey, a father and daughter murdered by Smith's boyfriend, who later died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. It's Nova Scotia's 4th murder-suicide linked to intimate partner violence in just 4 months.
It's deeply alarming. I think each case that has happened in the last several months is a tragedy.
Nova Scotia already declared domestic violence an epidemic, so have dozens of communities in Ontario.
A key question that we need to be asking ourselves is, why don't we talk about this issue?
More education is needed, says survivor and advocate Kylie Nunn. She wants people to be aware of coercive control, a pattern of abusive behavior that entraps victims.
In cases of intimate partner homicide, there is very often coercive control present, sometimes without even physical violence leading up to such an incident.
Advocates say addressing root causes is not just about more support. It's about changing the culture in Canada, changing attitudes, they say, that normalize and excuse violence. Heather.
Sarah, thank you for this. Today marks the beginning of the final goodbye for former U.S. President Jimmy Carter, who passed away at the end of December. CTV's Raheem Ladani now with how the 39th American president is being remembered.
Family of America's longest-lived president watched as former Secret Service agents who protected James Earl Carter Jr. serve as pallbearers, walking alongside the hearse as it exited the Phoebe Sumter Medical Center campus in Americus, Georgia. This marks the beginning of a week of funeral services, saying farewell to the former president who passed away at the age of 100, just over a year after his late wife, Rosalind.
He had said in these last few weeks that frankly, he wanted to go see Rosalind. That was his words. And that made us all feel okay with it, right? He is at peace. We were at peace.
Carter's motorcade rolled through the town of Plains, where he lived more than 80 years in and around the rural southern community. Then stopping in front of his boyhood home, where he grew up without electricity or running water. Carter went on to graduate from the U.S. Naval Academy, then took over the family business as a peanut farmer, before launching his political career, elected to the Georgia State Senate.
Not only was he one of the early Southern governors promoting civil rights for African Americans in the South, one of the few progressives of his era in the South, he also became throughout his days a thorn sometimes, in fact, in the side of presidents who were more politically expedient than he was.
While Carter served just one term in the White House, he continued his advocacy for democracy and remained on the global stage as a humanitarian until his passing.
Young people growing up in the developing world who no longer will suffer the horrors of guinea worm disease or river blindness because of efforts that he fought.
The public will be able to pay their respects to the former president as he lies in repose inside the Carter Presidential Center in Atlanta through the weekend.
I remember him at my uncle's funeral back in 1988. Yes, my uncle used to work for him in Plains, so I remember him being there. So yes, I was off today, so I couldn't miss it. Yeah. I don't care how cold it was, I had to be here.
His remains will then travel to Washington, where he will lie in state until the funeral next Thursday. Raheem Ladani, CTV News, Toronto.
The current U.S. president taking today to honor some notable citizens.
Presidential Medal of Freedom is awarded to Michael J. Fox.
Canadian actor Michael J. Fox was among those presented with the Presidential Medal of Freedom by Joe Biden. It is the highest civilian honor in America. 19 people in total received the award. Coming up, the crisis unfolding in the prairies.
Grasslands are the most endangered habitat in Canada.
The major threat and the birds most at risk. Plus, a piece of Littlest Hobo history. Canada may be staring down the barrel of an ecological disaster. Bird populations in a certain part of the country are seeing a staggering decline. CTV's Alex Carpa shows us where and what's causing it.
Grassland bird populations on the prairies are declining at a rapid rate, with a 67% drop since 1970. That's according to a new report that shows without urgent action, several species, including the chestnut-collared longspur and the burrowing owl, may be lost in Canada.
Grasslands are the most endangered habitat in Canada. So to see these declines in grassland birds that go along with all of the loss of grassland habitat that we've seen, yeah, unfortunately, not a surprise.
The report also highlights decreases of some other populations, like migratory birds and shorebirds.
This is an ongoing decline. It was noted in the 2019 State of the Birds report, and it's serious and it's urgent.
Much of the decline is due to habitat loss, which threatens birds across the country. The destruction of habitats are driven by agricultural practices, urban development, and infrastructure.
Birds need places to live, and a lot of these species have evolved to be very picky about where they live, what kind of food they eat.
Hogan says roughly 80% of Canada's prairie grasslands have disappeared, with around 600 square kilometers being lost every year. Conservationists say the report highlights where the problems are.
It's also showing us that when we do understand a problem well and we direct our action towards it and invest in it appropriately, that we can have a really amazing impact on grass or on bird conservation.
Alex Carpa, CTV News, Winnipeg.
Still ahead, a comeback for Canada's housing market. What 2025 has in store. We take a look at market trends for house hunters. It's no secret the deepening housing crisis is severely impacting Canadian dreams of home ownership. Canada's housing market is among the most unaffordable in the world. So what does 2025 hold for house hunters? CTV News chief anchor Omar Sachedina recently had a chat with Mathieu Laberge from the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation to find out.
Mathieu, it's really great to see you. I want to start
by talking about prospective buyers and then current homeowners. For anybody who in 2024 was sitting on the sidelines wondering whether they should be buying homes, but chose not to, what's your advice for them in 2025?
Well, as you know very well, this is a pretty uncertain and volatile environment, geopolitically, economically, in the housing market. So when I think about housing, I look at it from the personal side. It has to make personal sense. So whether you're envisioning to move, rent, or buy this year, you should always take it a step back and make sure that makes sense for your personal financial situation, and that will be financially sustainable over the medium term. Now, will rate go down? Possibly, but certainly not back to where they were during the pandemic period.
And there are many mortgages that are up for renewal in 2025, and I imagine the lower rates that we've been seeing will be advantageous to those people.
Well, you're right. There's 1.2 million mortgages up for renewal in 2025. That is very significant. The vast majority of them will be renewed at much higher rates than they were initially contracted.
Important to keep in mind. So lower rates, but not quite as low as what we saw during the pandemic.
Exactly. And, when you look back at the end of 2024, we saw some steam picking up in the markets, especially in Ontario, BC, and Alberta. But the interesting thing is at the same time in Toronto and Vancouver, late mortgage payments started going up. They actually doubled from their throw of 22-23, and we see them doubling again over the next 6 to 12 months. So there's something there to keep an eye on. But let me tell you something. Resiliency has been Canadians' superpower over the last several years. And there's one thing about resiliency, it's a lot about being forward-looking. So if you're a Canadian, you're renewing your mortgage this year and you have questions, reach out early to your financial institution and discuss how to navigate this environment.
And speaking of being forward-looking, I want to ask you about the Liberals' revised immigration targets. They are now lower. What impact will that have on the housing market this year?
Well, there's one thing about immigration policies is they take time to take hold. And so we do see the new immigration policies removing some pressure off the housing market. But that will be very gradual and will unfold over several years. But in fact, we started to see some impact of the international student immigration policies, for example. Anecdotally, we hear that rental units in college and university towns and neighborhoods are sitting on the market for longer. Our own rental market report, our latest one, shows that vacancy rates in Canada have gone up over the last year, which is good. It means more options for renters, but they are still below their 10-year average. So that's why it's so important to keep building rental units so we can restore affordability in Canada and we can help fix the housing crisis.
Mathieu, at the beginning of our conversation, you mentioned the word volatility. In terms of specifics, are there any red flags, anything you're watching particularly that could be a potential headwind for the market this year?
Well, you know the old saying, right? When the U.S. sneezes, Canada coughs. And so we have an upcoming U.S. administration coming in. That's obviously not a red flag per se, but something we'll keep an eye on with the question of tariffs, but also fiscal stimulus that could have offsetting impact on the Canadian economy. The other thing we'll be looking at is the pace of construction in Canada. We estimate that we can significantly increase the pace of housing construction if we tackle our productivity issues. And that's something we need to keep an eye on in 2025.
All right, Mathieu Laberge from the Canada Mortgage Housing Corporation. Thank you so much and Happy New Year.
Thank you. Happy New Year as well.
Still ahead tonight.
Maybe tomorrow I want to settle down.
Pitching for a star to honor a song etched into the country's soundtrack.
There's a world that's waiting to unfold. A brand new tale no one has ever told.
It's a song etched into the country's soundtrack, the theme from The Littlest Hobo, a popular TV series from the 1980s. Fans are now rallying to give the show and its iconic anthem the recognition they believe it deserves. Here's CTV's John Benavalli-Rao.
This is the original score.
That's it.
This is it here.
Wow.
Terry Bush showed us a piece of Littlest Hobo history. After 45 years, he's still got the handwritten sheet music.
Right there. Do-wee-oo.
That he used to create the TV theme, beloved by millions.
There's a voice that keeps on calling me.
That's Terry's voice you hear.
Maybe tomorrow I'll wanna settle down.
A song so many of us remember from our childhoods.
Maybe tomorrow I wanna settle down.
And covered countless times.
Every stomp I make, I'll make a new friend.
I couldn't believe the effect on people that it had and still does to this day.
This is your moment!
Some of those fans pushing to get both the show and song a star on Canada's Walk of Fame.
It's an honor. It's an honor.
In the late 1970s, Bush was writing jingles. When he was asked to take a shot at creating the theme...
Say, he hasn't got a collar, Harry, or a license tag.
...for a reboot of a TV series being produced by CTV. And originally based on an American movie about a wandering German shepherd who helps strangers.
He explained what it was about, the dog going from town to town. I said, sure.
Bush asked a friend, John Crossan, to come up with the lyrics. And using this very guitar, Bush says he created the melody in about 20 minutes.
I was very pleased with it. I thought, that's a nice song, a nice little country song, and it's good.
But executives at CTV rejected the song several times before finally giving it the go-ahead.
Never in my wildest imagination did I think it would do what it did.
So if you want to join me...
The Littlest Hobo ran for 6 seasons and eventually aired in dozens of countries, including Japan and the UK, where pub-goers would sing the theme.
In the bars at night, when they closed at night, they played the song. It was the closing theme for the pubs. There's a voice that keeps on calling me.
He's now 82 and hadn't sung it in years, but Bush was kind enough to play it again for us.
Maybe tomorrow I'll find what I call.
A petition on change.org calls for the show and Bush to get that star.
I think we're about 5,500 signatures so far.
Podcaster Craig Baird came up with the idea after hearing Batman was being honored on Hollywood's Walk of Fame.
I thought, that the Littlest Hobo is kind of Canada's Batman. He essentially fights crime, goes from town to town.
There's a voice that keeps on calling me.
David Glabay is among the musicians promoting the petition.
We'll always be.
That song is just a piece of Canadian history right there, and I think he really deserves a lot more recognition for that.
A classic show and song that refuses to move on, unlike the hobo.
Until tomorrow,
I'll just keep moving on.
John Benavalli Rouse, CTV News, Ajax, Ontario.
Such an iconic song. That is our newscast for all of us at CTV National News. Thank you for watching. I'm Heather Butts. Good night, and I'll see you again tomorrow.